Juan and I traveled across town to our friend's apartment where we were meeting a group of 5 other people. After the usual talk for a period of time, the first person started off with 100 mg intramuscularly. Alert at about 3 to 5 minutes and fully out there at about 20 minutes. Juan then went next at 50 mg, followed by Hurley at 100 mg, then the 2 girls at 75 mg. One participant had been taking several psychotropic meds regularly and he elected to smoke it, at the 50 mg and then the 100 mg level. After everyone had their dose, and I was comfortable no major reactions were occurring, I went ahead with 100 mg myself. About 20 to 30 minutes into it, Hurley became somewhat disoriented, jumped up and said he needed a hug. He then wandered around and to my eyes seemed to get more and more disoriented, as did his significant other. At approximately 45 minutes or so into it, he began vomiting profusely and kept saying, "Something is wrong," and, "I want a doctor." He seemed quite dissociated to me. His significant other seemed to have a difficult experience also. She became somewhat rigid, reminding me of a tardive dyskinesia-like reaction, and also seemed almost totally dissociated. I found my experience to be one of the best tryptamine experiences I have ever had. I've had experiences extensively with mushrooms, Probab 75 to 100x, as well as significant experience smoking DMT, 5-MeO-DMT and combinations of DMT and 5-MeO, and ayahuasca. This material definitely has the tryptamine signature. The difference for me was the total non-threatening nature of the experience. I've gotten into spaces with the other tryptamines mentioned that have been somewhat scary at times, particularly at the higher doses, 7–10 grams of mushrooms. What usually happens is what I call the confrontation with the self. I seem to be able to transcend this area with this material. Many times with other trips I get stuck in what Groff would call the psychodynamic, biographical phase of the hallucinogenic experience. It seemed that I leapfrogged over this stage and went directly into the transpersonal realm, and for lack of a better way to describe it I'd have to call it bliss. This lasted for an unknown period of time and was interrupted by my feeling a need to come to the aid of the participants having a difficult time. I personally found no difficulty pulling myself together to assist with others, although it definitely had a grounding impact on my experience. The person doing the smoking of the material noted effects at both the 50 and 100 mg level, although much shorter lived, maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and less intense. At the 2-hour point, once I assured myself that things were probably going to be okay, I decided to further my knowledge of this compound and took another 60 mg IM. I found it had minimal effect other than possibly extending the trailing off period. Seems that tolerance had developed rapidly. Further experiments for me will revolve around a higher dose. I think I could easily handle 150 mg IM. As well as doing boosters earlier in the experience prior to the 2-hour point. I'm thinking of boosting at the 30-minute and 1-hour point to see if it simply extends the experience or puts one further out. At the 4-hour point everyone was back to baseline, or close thereabouts. All effects seemed to have worn off. Juan and I were easily able to travel back to his apartment where sleep came easily. I have had no problems with the injection site. It was very slightly uncomfortable the following day. I've had no reports of problems from the others in this regard. As my experience with this progresses I'll update the group, but overall, for me, it was fantastic. I am not certain others in the group feel the same way, but Juan and I talked extensively about our experiences and he had what he considers to be a peak experience, at the 50 mg level. I would describe Juan as usually quite a hard head, in terms of dosages, so his experience at 50 mg is interesting. He and I are both anxious to further experiment with this most interesting compound. It is somewhat disorienting, which, for some in the group was disconcerting. If one isn't grounded well psychically I would be careful with experimenting with this, especially at higher levels.